Okay, hi guys. So here I have a Game Boy Micro. One of my friends found this in a basement. It had been left in the drawer of a dresser, and the basement had actually been flooded. Now, luckily, the dresser stayed dry, so the micro didn't get submerged, but it spent some time down there, and it got a little gross, I guess, moldy and stuff, and so it was having problems. Like it couldn't start games, and it was also dirty. So at first it was essentially just turning on and just get stuck there. It didn't matter if you had a game in it, if you turned it off and on again several times, if you blew in the slot or anything, it just got stuck there. And it didn't matter what game I tried. I even tried the games in different systems and they all worked fine, but this thing just wasn't going. So this is pretty much what the system does if you don't have a game in it. So I suspected that maybe it was that the contacts weren't being made in the cartridge slot, so I thought I'd open it up and take a look, and sure enough, it was pretty darn grimy in there. It was kind of disgusting. Yeah, even as I was taking the parts off, there were just bits of stuff falling all over the place and making a mess. So once I had it open, I kind of just flipped it upside down and tapped it out, and a whole bunch of stuff fell out, and then I closed it all back up again. And just the fact of doing that pretty much got the system working again. Yeah, and of course, it's making me a liar. It's still a little dirty and finicky, so it's not always gonna boot up. Yeah, see, it's still having a hard time, so sometimes you just have to reinsert the game a bit there. There you go. So now it's gonna go and boot the game, so I've got Pokemon Red in here. So as you can see, it still needs some work, so I'm gonna go ahead and open this thing up again, and I'll try to clean it up a bit more. So that's what this video is going to show. So I have with me a whole slew of tools from iFixit, great site for finding all the tools you need to start tinkering with electronics. Got a nice 54-bit screwdriver kit here that pretty much has everything you would need to open all manner of things. So I'm going to take out my screwdriver, and Nintendo started with just some normal Phillips bits on the outside and went on to tri-wings on the inside. So I'll get my tri-wing bit ready here. Alright, so you start with the battery compartment. One little screw on the side there. Once that's off, you pop it open. The lid just comes off and you can put that aside. You got the battery inside. It's just connected by a little plastic connector. It's a bit hard to show in the camera there. Anyways, you just try to gently pull on the connector and it comes out. It's just a little plastic socket connector, so that comes right out as if you pull on the cables carefully. Then you can just put the battery aside there. And then you have the inside of the battery compartment. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but it's kind of gross in there already. So then there's a whole bunch more screws underneath the battery compartment, and that's going to help us get into the system. So there are some screws on the top and the side of the micro, so I'll start taking those out. So most of the ones that you can get to easily that Nintendo doesn't want you opening are going to be tri-wing screws. So I'll put my tri-wing bit on there, and luckily they're not torqued too much. They're pretty easy to take out. So there's one, and then take off the top. They're so tiny. Make sure you don't lose these guys. we go. Alright, now for the screws inside the battery compartment. There are 2 tri-wings in here. So essentially this one right here is a tri-wing, and this one up here is a tri-wing. And then you've got Phillips here, here, and here, which come off pretty well with that Phillips 00. So anyways, let's start with the tri-wings. And then I will switch to the Phillips head. Those out. So there's 2 kind of gold ones on the side of the unit. And there's 2 silver ones closer to the inside. Okay. So now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws removed from the battery compartment. 1 or 2 screws removed from here. I think one of them was missing, and 2 of them removed up here. So once all those screws are off, you can start taking off the panels. So the one that's kind of covering the slot, the cartridge slot, that comes off first just by lifting. And there you go. You can see that there's kind of some gross residue in here. It's kind of crusty. So put that aside for now. And this is the inside of the micro. So you have the card reader here. And this is where obviously there's going to be like contact problems if there's too much gunk on here, especially like underneath, because this is kind of the top of it. You can see the motherboard here that's still underneath a few more layers. So what you're going to want to do is take off this gray plastic part next. So by now Nintendo figures you're not getting past the first layer, so the rest is just Phillips. I can stick to the Phillips bit. And I'll take off this screw in the corner here. And the screw on the motherboard here. And I think that's it. So once the silver screws out, the plastic retainer part starts coming off, and then pretty much all the buttons start coming out. So the first thing to fall out is normally the volume button. Volume up, volume down, etc. And then the shoulder button comes off at the spring. And make sure you don't lose the spring, because it disconnects from the button. The other side is kind of held in by a little clip in the frame, so you have to push it towards you, and then it lifts right out, and then the frame part comes apart. So again, this one is kind of gunky, and it's all plastic, so this will be easy to clean. Alright, so then the other shoulder button comes out, with the spring as well. Just put that all aside. Alright, so now we have the motherboard exposed. And it's kind of grimy. Mostly the external facing parts are the ones that are the most affected. So like the recharging port here has gotten pretty corroded, and there's gunk all along the shoulder buttons and along where the slot for the cartridges and the headphone jack. So that's going to be a bit of a mess to clean up. So at this point, I'm just going to start throwing things into water. So I just got a little bowl with water and a bit of dish soap in there. So all the pieces that are entirely made of plastic, like the shoulder buttons, for example, I'm just going to throw them in there and just let them start soaking. I took off the springs, so it's really just plastic at this point. The retaining layer for the motherboard is also completely made of plastic, so I'll just throw that in there. There you go. The battery compartment has a little foamy sponge thing to it, so I don't want to submerge that. Obviously I don't want to do the battery. The top layer of the micro, it's kind of hard to tell what this is made of. It feels like maybe there's plastic on top, but the battery compartment is made of metal, so if I do get this wet, I don't want to let it soak too long there because I don't want the metal getting in trouble. Now there's the volume button thing. I'll drop that in as well. So I did grab a few Q-tips before starting, so I can try to clean the battery compartment a bit. I'm just wetting the Q-tip and trying to push away some of the gunk that's in there. Ooh, yeah, that's pretty gross. A bit too much water in here. But it is taking the stuff off, so that's good. Yeah, just sop it up, and you can see the Q-tip is getting a bit discolored dealing with this stuff. Try to take a bit of water off the Q-tip so there's not too much of it going into the thing. So I'll keep cleaning this. Alright, so that pretty much does it. There's just a few spots left. Okay, so I got most of the gunk off the shell. There's a bit that's kind of stuck to the sponge, but there's not much I can do about that. I can give the outside a bit of a wipe over, but I can clean the outside later with a cloth or something. So anyways, I just grabbed some paper towel to try and dry it up and not leave too much moisture on the parts after I clean them. So that one's done. Now this thing, ugh, that's gonna be pretty gross. I gotta try and get like all this stuff off that you can see on the camera. So I'll get started on that. Yikes. Q-tip's looking on the side at this point. I'll start using the other end. Oh, there we go. It's coming off. It's time to give up on this Q-tip. It's gotten pretty gross there, so switch to another one. Well, luckily it's all coming off pretty well. Just try to get everything loose here and then pass over it with a paper towel after. Some weird red stuff on there. I'm not sure where that came from, but it's all coming off pretty well. other side of the battery plate. Where the stuff is. Pretty easy to get off. Some sort of dirt and gunk. Once you get it wet, it comes off pretty easily. So, all right. I think that's it. So, let's see if I can clean this up with a paper towel. I missed a spot on the bottom of the battery compartment there. See if I missed any angles all around the thing. Okay, that looks good. It's another spot. You really gotta cover all your angles here. Okay. Okay, so I think that's the most of it. Just missed the outside part where the screws went in. Makes sense the dirt would get in there. Okay. Sorry, this is taking a while here, but I want to make sure I get everything before I put it back together. So, alright, so now the piece is pretty clean. It's like shining again. It doesn't have any of that weird gunk on it anymore. So that one's done. As for the parts that I had soaking in here, I'm just gonna take a quick look and see if everything came off. I might have to pass over some parts with the Q-tip. Looks like almost everything came off. Just a few things that got stuck a bit tightly there. Well, I think that's good. Yeah. I might just rinse this in some fresh water later, just to make sure there's no soap residue left on it. Not that that would be too bad. Got the shoulder buttons here. Now the shoulder buttons didn't get too dirty. Not sure why. They're pretty externally facing, but maybe it's that chrome finish that just makes it an illusion of, well, never mind, I spoke too soon. The sides of the buttons are pretty gross. That is where the dirt would get into the unit, so. Just do it once over the shoulder buttons. Volume thing. good. Alright, I think that's everything that I've washed there, so I think the video's already run long enough for this segment here, so I'll just go rinse the parts in the water, and I'll continue the video afterwards. Okay, so at this point, now that the cover parts have been cleaned and they're off drying, it's time to clean the rest of the micro. Now, you don't really need to go under the motherboard, because the slot is right here, and like there's nothing else facing the outside, so you can try to start cleaning this. I did pop the front panel off, and this part it could probably be cleaned. I mean, it's quite gross, so I'm gonna go over that with a Q-tip later, and I'm gonna try to make sure I don't get too much water like into the screen there, or none at all. I'll try my best just to wipe along the sides. I'll do that later off camera. Now, the problem part with the game is like the slot, right? So it's not making the contacts. Now, unfortunately, it's really hard to clean the slot because the contacts are inside, underneath this, and then they come outside. Now, I don't know if you can see this too well on the camera, but this thing is really dirty, and like when I was knocking it out earlier, a lot of the dirt was falling off of that, and I think that's what made it start working again. So I think what I'm going to try to do is just wet my Q-tip a bit and try to dry it off, and I'm just going to try to lightly go over it and see if I can clean it up a bit, especially along the back side between the charger port and it looks like there's a lot of gunk that got on there, and the pins that go up into the motherboard, those should be cleaned too. I kind of need something a bit more narrow to get in there. The Q-tip is a little too large, and it's getting a bit distorted by all the stuff it's getting stuck on. So it's doing a pretty good job for the rest of the spots. So I guess I'll just try to do this the best I can here. If I apply a bit of pressure, the Q-tip's gonna go inside between the plastic cracks there and brush up against the metal inside, so that's gonna help clean the prongs, at least on top. I'm gonna try to run it along the back again. Some pretty gross stuff in there. Alright, I'll just clean up a bit of the motherboard and the plate when I'm at it. Because this is the metal plate for the game cartridge, so that's going to get exposed to the outside and going to get a lot of gunk. The headphone jack too. The slot where the shoulder buttons go, that's pretty gunky. Oof, running out of Q-tips here. I want to make sure I don't get water inside the unit, so try to stick to the outside and not press too hard so the water doesn't get in there. Sometimes that's tricky because you need to press hard to get the gunk off. Rub it enough times and it'll come out. I don't know if the charger port is corroded or dirty, but I'll give it a run over and see what happens. Oh, well, that's actually cleaning it pretty good. So all I can guess by how this gunk is coming off is that it's kind of like a combination of maybe congealed like oil from hands and skin and stuff, but also maybe a bit of moisture and mold that might have formed because of the flooding and whatnot. Either way, I'm glad it's coming off easily. So even if you get a bit of water on the motherboard, it's not too big a deal. You just want to make sure that you give it enough time to all dry before you turn it on. It's really only when there's circuit or electricity going through a circuit that it can short out if there's liquid on it. So doing it while the liquid's off is not too bad. Just so long as you're not getting close to things that are like holding a charge, like maybe capacitors or I don't know, what else. Yeah. Something kind of green on the port connector. Scratch it off. Alright, well, just going down against the pins a bit more. I might try a different tool to get between the connectors there because there's still some dirt down there. I'm actually going to take what's called a spudger, which is a pointy piece of nylon, so it's non-conductive and it's not a danger of shocking your stuff. It's good for getting into tight spots and poking at things, so I'll try to get into the crease there and get some of that dirt away. Yuck. Well, it's working. Getting gunk on the spudger, but I can just wipe it off onto the paper towel. Yeah, this is really helping to get into the nooks and crannies there. So spudger's another tool you can get off iFixit, and I highly recommend you get one. Now the spudger is a pretty solid thing, so you don't want to press on anything too hard. You don't want to like bend any pins or knock off any components. Okay, well, I think that's pretty satisfactory. I left a nice crater here of dirt and stuff that fell out. So I'm gonna clean this up, the front panel, and I'll do another segment that puts this all back together. Okay, so now I've cleaned the front panel to the best of my ability. I'm probably gonna have to wipe down the screen again later, but I'm just gonna start putting this thing back together now. So I'll go back to the rear here, and we're gonna have to start with the plastic shell. Kind of went like this, but we want to make sure we get all the buttons in with that. So get your volume switch, your springs, and your shoulder button back. So there's left and right, and obviously it's like the opposite of where you're sitting, so the left comes into the top right corner. Just attach the spring to it. And just kind of insert the spring into the slot there. And then you can kind of push it into the corner, into its slot. You have to hold it down because it does want to spring out of there. I'll put the spring in the R button and put that on the left side. Okay, so now while you're holding down the two shoulder buttons, you can start putting the frame in to hold them down. So I would start with the right side, as it clips in to the left shoulder button anyways. Before you press down the right side, you want to put in the little volume slider, so that kind of just sits on the frame, on the side of the frame, and if the pin goes into the plastic frame, so make sure that's lined up, and then push it down. Oops, there we go. So once the plastic frame is holding the volume button in and the shoulder buttons, you can press the two shoulder buttons and tell that they're staying in place there. Then you're good to start putting the screws back in. So there was a silver screw with a Phillips screwdriver in the corner here. There you go. Pretty much what's holding the frame down. The golden screw doesn't go into the bottom corner. It actually goes into the motherboard here to hold down this panel. So you screw that in. There it goes. Goes right here, and you know that's the right one because once you put this panel over it, that the hole is covered. So when you put the panel in, you want to make sure it goes under the external lip. It sits evenly on all the sides there, and you're good to go. And that leaves only 2 screw holes on the right of the battery, 1 Torx on top, 1 Torx tri-wing on the top, 1 tri-wing on the bottom, and 2 more on the side there. So that's what I started with at the beginning. So the gold ones go on the outside. There we go, so those are going to hold on the battery cover nicely. Those are the Torx, so let's save those. Let's stick with the Phillips for now. I keep saying Torx, but it's tri-wing. Not sure why. Okay, so now I put the 2 gold screws back up here, and the silver screws down here, and then the 2 tri-wings are going to go in here. So I'll switch my bit to the tri-wing. Screw that in. Those are really light. It doesn't really feel like they're going in, but they are, and eventually they slow down. So that's going in. Okay. So now the only thing that's left are the little external facing screws, so grab those and be very careful, you don't want to lose them. Oops. Maybe if you have a I'm on the top, okay. If you have a magnetic screwdriver, you can try to put it on the screwdriver first and lead it in. There we go. That'll prevent the plate from shifting. Okay, and then there's 2 on top near the charge port. Alright, there you go. Put it back together, nothing's missing or sticking out. So now I'm going to put the battery back in. So for that, you just find the little port inside. It's hard to show you. There you go. The white thing here. So align the connector, the battery, and try to lead it in there. Of course, it's going to be hard to push that in unless you have something like a Spudger. Or you can use a screwdriver. You just need to line it up and then push it in. It's going to be a hard time here. There. So now it's inserted again. The wire just kind of folds over itself and the battery goes in. And I can put the battery cap back on. Just switch back to Phillips head for right there. There you go. So I could put the faceplate back on, but it's kind of washing right now. So let's insert a game and see if this worked. Right on. Perfect. Didn't give me any trouble there. I just inserted the game and it's good to go. Make sure the volume button works. Makes a little beep sound every time you press it so you know it's working. And then the volume of this thing doesn't go very high. And make sure you can press the buttons. The D-pad works. The start menu. And the start button and the select button. So obviously I can click A on the Pokédex, I can press B to get out. The D-pad works in all directions. Start brings up the menu, select brings up the help, so I think we're good. I don't know if the shoulder buttons can do anything in here. No, it doesn't look like it, so anyways, it looks good. I'll just eject and try again. Yep, good as new. So, successfully cleaned. Contacts were the most important part to clean there because they were preventing a good connection with the game. That's what was preventing it from starting up. So if you just want to focus on that and all the dirt and grime elsewhere doesn't bother you, then go for it. Just make sure you don't lose any of the screws, you keep track of all the parts, you don't lose anything important, and it'll be good as new. Thanks for watching.